Krishna, thank you very much for being here. Thank you for inviting me into your space. It's really beautiful to be in the room where you develop some of your music.
I haven't really yet, actually. This is a new space. So I'm still like working on it. Yesterday I was painting over here, and so but yes, this is potentially where I'll be doing a lot of the music, and I've been rehearsing and fiddling around. I realized yesterday that I think all the construction is a form of resistance against making music.
That's
so I've been keeping myself very busy the last month, like building, and I like to build, and it's a way of engaging a creative part of my mind that's similar to music, actually. So it satisfies a certain creative part of me, but it's sort of. You ever read The War of Art?
Yeah.
So the idea of resistance, and every day I face that, and so that was a very easy out. Like, I gotta build that thing, or I gotta work on the acoustical treatment. So I guess I'll head to Lowe's. I'll do the rehearsal later.
This is an interesting topic then, or concept, because I feel deep importance in building the foundation of something. And how does that relate to whether it's resistance or actually being prepared to do something?
Well, like most things, it's both. I'm definitely like laying down the foundation and sowing the seeds and getting the fields ready. And so absolutely, on a conscious level and unconscious level, it's like all this is about preparation and setting the stage. But it can be more than one thing at once. And I also recognize that creating music is different than preparing to create music, and one can be a form of resistance. So me tinkering and setting up is valuable, it's useful, but you have to balance it out. Like the best days are ones where, like, rehearsing live stuff is a form of playing music, or playing on the piano, or just recording something for a half an hour and then getting into the work, right? And for me, I can get obsessive about projects, so it's easy for me to let the building and the creation thing be the whole day. And then I really didn't actually move the ball down the field for having music come out of your vessel, so to speak.
How long have you been playing music?
With this project since 2008, and before that I had other bands that were more like piano pop commercial type things, and before that it was shitty demos in college and stuff on 4 tracks, and before that it was I wasn't making my own music. I was more like doing school stuff, like band and choir, lots of that, musical theater, all that. So that was sort of like school. And then as I got into college, I got more into making my own. And then the digital revolution happened around 2000, 2001. And that was a huge entryway for a lot of people into making music on computers, which before was pretty much studio stuff or 4 tracks. And then it was just a long process of making really bad music and just keep doing it and slowly getting a little bit better and a little bit, just improving your skill set, your ears getting better, learning how to mix because no one else is there to mix for you. And I think I've released 22 East Forest releases, and before that I probably had another 10 from my other project. And back then it took a lot more work to get a release across the finish line. It was more money and time. Than today. I feel like the bar is a lot lower. People can just like put things out. It's just a matter of time. So anyway, been doing it a long time, but it's been an evolution for sure.
With you being from what I know of you and just what I can feel through your music, pretty grounded and open and mindful of your journey. Probably more so as we go on the journey, we become more mindful very naturally. But how has it been to watch your evolution through this process and to be where you've been working with Ram Dass, or really being able to help the world through your music, man? your album with Ram Dass is revolutionized a lot of people internally. And I was listening to some of the songs coming here, whether it's your song Grounded, like it seems like what you're doing is like washing away the room and opening up the space through music. And from my own personal perspective, that comes from a much deeper place than just thinking about doing music. It's really beautiful to experience, whether it's in person with you twice now or through the stereo in my car. There seems to be a much deeper origin that you function through, and it's felt through people, through their nervous system. It's recognized.
Well, thanks for saying that. I would say it is not, as opposed to saying deeper, I'd say it's not as casual for me. And that's because it's like the music itself and the creation of it and how I'm doing it and why I'm doing it is the same as my own personal inquiry into my inner life and sort of those bigger questions about what it means to be alive and on this planet and sort of so that the day-to-day life as a spiritual walk is one that I became really engaged in my late 20s, and it just never really went away. And for me, a doorway into it more as a practice was creating music that I could maybe use inside the psychedelic space, which for me at that time, that was my teacher and my doorway in. Everything else didn't really crack the nut enough, and that I needed something that strong to kind of show me and have a physical experience that I couldn't really argue with. And not only that, maybe it was so wildly powerful that I was trying to make sense of it. And I didn't have a lot of teachers. I wasn't in any lineage. And so I had to just I was in New York City at the time. Like I just had to kind of figure it out. And so I was really hungry because I grew up with a lot of depression and anxiety, and that's something I've always dealt with. And that stuff was really scary and hard. And so if I had start to have these cracks or like sort of opportunities or like there's a window into an experience, I'm like, what is that? Like I could tell there's something important there, and I wanted to sort of navigate it or explore it a bit. So I was making music to use in that space and music to kind of help me in that space maybe get to these places I had felt that I didn't know where they were or how I got there or what they even meant. All I knew is intuitively there was something really, it felt like home in a way. Even though it was fleeting. I wasn't trying to like be high all the time or anything like that. But, well, for a while I was literally high all the time on weed. But
there's a difference though.
Yes, there's a difference. I mean, the psychedelic space I feel is non-addictive. I don't count weed as psychedelic. But anyway. So music, look, a lot of these things are a perfect storm in your lives. I don't feel, some of it I chose and some of it's my soul path and some of it is just, however you want to look at it. And it was one of those things where I was choosing those things and exploring those things, but also my life was conspiring for it to happen too, because my friend who became my first manager, he started setting up lots of ceremonies for me to lead. I never would have done that on my own. I didn't have that kind of ego or even confidence, I should say. Confidence to be like, yes, I should be leading a psilocybin ceremony. But by doing that, inevitably, you're forced to learn and you're forced to try things and you're going to learn and you're going to make mistakes. But by doing that for a long time, it was a very unique situation, extremely unique. This is well before, this is 10 years ago, where the psilocybin in the cultural context was not as prevalent, was certainly not as accepted. It was not like this it is today, which is wonderful how it is today, but it was very different. And that helped me build a sound. And I had no goals either, by the way, of performing it or becoming anything more. I wanted my work to help people, but I wasn't like, I'm gonna go tour and that kind of stuff. It was really like a thing in the underground. I just wanted it to work well. And so over years of doing that, I think something started to emerge that was just very different and singular. And I kind of think I'm a one-trick pony in a lot of ways. So I didn't know how to translate that into like a club situation or a theater situation or a festival. And that's when I started putting on my hat, because I felt the calling after like 5 years of like bringing it into the public light a little more, but I didn't know how. And so I started to bring in those tools I had from my past of like, well, I was in other bands. I know what that's like to be on those stages and what it takes to hold their attention and hooks. And I also had that background as in the theater, as like I know what it's like to be on a stage and the basics, like Aristotelian drama, and like you have a story and there's a climax and there's tension and there's release. It's like that was familiar, but how did I bring it into this psychedelic mushroom music? And doing that dance is something that I feel like I'm doing every day, because it's also a dance of capitalism and commercialism and my own ego. And that's the real work for me, where my personal work is threading the needle between not falling into, I could easily fall into like, oh, I'm this big hot shit thing, or I just got this gig or whatever it is. And then like, oh, this person wants this thing, and boom, it's over. like I just mean you've basically, you're lost. And I'm not offering, all I am, like all of us, we're conduits for something, for divinity. And so I'm just trying to open that conduit and be as pure as I can, because what is coming through, like all forms of creativity, I can't give ownership to, I don't know what that is. It's coming through the filter of my being. My job is to be as clean as I can and as disciplined as I can and as open as I can. And I think that's interesting, like the forms that it takes. But, what the muse is nobody actually knows. It's God. It's God. It's the Maya. It's us playing, and that's kind of what all music is, and all everything is, in a sense, in my opinion. Not just the sacred, but the profane. And I don't understand it, but I know how it can help me feel, and I think it's kind of like soothes us in a way and inspires us while we're on our journeys. And so I've dedicated my life to continuing to explore that as my own path, and that then translates into being something that's sort of a universal path.
Holy crap, man. It's just, you're the real deal.
Dude,
and
I'm no different than you.
Yeah, I know. And that's why I even say that. Like, that's the fucking beauty in what you said, man. Your practice is through you. We are bridges. We are channels. We are chakarunas. And if we can become as clear and as humble and as grounded as possible and as genuine as we should be and are able to be, we are able to blend through dimension with pure beauty, and truly bring what is always around us into the planet, with the planet, for the planet. And we all hold different positions in that. Music for some people, podcasts for some people, art, even discussion, therapy in certain circumstances. If we can truly align with that divine presence. I say this often, actually. It feels like XPAND comes through me, not from me. And there's a lot of different components in whatever's being produced here. And it's coming through deep plant medicine journeys and meditation and floating and discussion and who we're around, and understanding that our external environments blend in our internal environments and vice versa. There seems to be some fluid, natural mechanism of operation that builds who we are and what we are even able to experience, whether it's thought patterns or emotions. And it's so fucking cool to meet people who blend their actual world, not what they want to be appeared as, into their work. And I think whether or not people do that, that's why they resonate with your message, because they're able to feel it. It's like, I've heard you talk about Ram Dass in the sense of, or his guru showed him that it was possible to love everybody. And Don Howard helped show me that it's possible to embody deep wisdom and love you regardless of who you are and what you've been through. And to have those recognitions viscerally, man, that's what helps us open up truly and expand who we are able to be.
Yeah. Yeah, I think music has a way of inspiring people and always has. It touches a non-language sort of emotional core in our being. So it's why it's so popular. It's very inspirational. It just kind of works in all these amazing, amazing ways. The complexities of harmonies and rhythm and how it combines. It's really fun. And I don't want people to think that it's some rarefied space to be quote unquote connected to yourself or your life. It's not. It doesn't. You don't have to even. It's not relevant. It's not more relevant if I'm doing that through a form of music that might seem, I don't know, challenging to do from someone else's perspective, to if you're doing the dishes, to if you're at the checkout counter at the grocery store. It's all the same. It's all equally of value. And I often say to folks that kind of what we're looking for, often seeking this sort of unrequited energy, it's no further away than your next breath. And it's something we're meant to fall out of. And there's often this yearning to, quote, people use the term remember or coming home. And that's all well and good, but we also are meant to forget. That's why we're here. And it's not to kick ourselves. It's sort of saying like, no, that's the engine of all of this, is this yin and yang, this in and out. And we're just, Ram Dass liked to talk about sort of watching the show go by. It's not that you're trying to change the show. That's a fool's errand. It's sort of this ability to witness it and love it and not say that's better, that's worth. It's like, so... there I am getting angry. I love it. I can love that in the way I can love all of my feelings. And God knows in my own internal process is sort of where the rubber really meets the road. And it's easy to inspire people publicly. For me, that's like easy. And it feels great. It feels in my power. What's harder is walking the walk internally. And I don't expect my internal life to be as perfect, and I should say perfect at all, but I also can have the compassion that there's room for improvement, and it's like it's okay, and I'm human, and like I'm just sort of watching it happen. And for a lot of us, the real work we're doing is in our relationships, probably whoever's the closest to you, even or your dogs and pets and stuff, the things that you're around the most, you're the closest to. And so one of them is yourself, right? That's probably the biggest one. And then if we have partners and family and friends, this is where it's like, I think the real work is being done. And your public face is part of that, but for most people, that's a part of the picture. But the point is that we're all kind of doing the same thing in just different shapes and forms, and it all has equal value. And music is one thing that's there that kind of helps us and inspires us, but so is like the way you give your attention to any person for even a moment. That's another gift that's maybe the most powerful, right? And these things are full of craziness and humor, and sometimes you need to play those roles that you fall out. You need to forget for a bit, and it's like, okay, maybe right now you don't have it to give this person what you gave this other person this moment, and just accepting that. As opposed to like, I'm not the enlightened being right now. It's like, but you are.
That's amazing. One thing that's such a beautiful concept, I think this really blends into meditation for a lot of people, in the aspect of, I feel like when we aren't focused and we have that recognition, it actually helps us feel what being focused feels like, or what being scattered feels like. So we get these two pieces of reference on the same spectrum of perspective that help us kind of guide back into homeostasis. And whether that's forgetting or remembering or whatever term people resonate with, it is very beneficial to feel as much of that spectrum as possible. And that's where compassion for me during plant medicine journeys has been really built. You know, feeling the suffering of the planet, of other people, man. I don't talk about like my actual psychedelic experiences much, but there was one journey where I was literally feeling the death of 1 million people. I was feeling this visceral sensation of murdering people, like this crazy fucking combination of like the true like all of suffering. And it was one of the hardest nights of my entire life, but it was one of the most beneficial nights of my entire life. It really helped blow up and blossom an ability to feel deep senses of compassion. And it's so fascinating how anything in life almost opens up a doorway of potential in other moments of our life. Whether they're that ceremony in general helping blossom a deeper recognition when I was in Peru with Mother Ayahuasca. The first time in Peru with Mother Ayahuasca helped open up doors for the second time to be experienced. And there seems to be this elongated sense of perspective that we're able to watch or try and interfere with. It's powerful.
I think interfere is an interesting way of looking at it, because that's probably a tough path, to interfere. It seems like you're trying to stop something. It's like it's a flow of a river, perhaps. It's like you're not going to stop the river. So you can change it. You can try and change its course. That's a hell of a lot of work. It's possible to change the course of a river, but that's about all you can do. You can't stop it. And it's the old John Lennon line of just go with the river, go with the flow. I don't know if it's sort of like maybe there isn't another option. And when we recognize that, it's a different perspective.
I know you're in thought, but how much do you resonate with Taoism? Because that seems to be a very similar concept to what
I got into it. The Tao Te Ching is, I think, a beautiful book, and it's something I like to reference from time to time. And I got into it. I was introduced to it in college way back at the beginning of sort of all of this. I'm not a scholar of it, but I think a lot of these wisdom traditions, they obviously all have lots of great wisdom. And Taoism is a great one. I like stuff that works with puns and like koans or things that kind of stop the gears in your head with contradictions, because to me there's a humor to that, and it also is representing the paradox of existence. Because anytime anything's too on the nose, it's sort of like, yeah, but what about the other side that it's not? Because that's always true. It's like everything's always a bit of a paradox. That's the nature of our existence. So Taoism is great because of that, because that's kind of, to me, what it's always dancing around. And it usually has a sense of humor too, but beauty and poetry. And Ram Dass was a lot like that. He's sort of a modern day Taoist and or a Buddhist, because he brought in that charisma of humor mixed with beautiful poetry. And that's one of the things I liked about him a lot.
And almost the nature of planting seeds for them to blossom even years later in your life too. Like, I feel like a lot of people at his level, whatever dimension that may be, even in terms of levels, it's a weird way to put it, but it's almost like they have an ability to say things knowing the depth of the phrase, but knowing and loving that you may not comprehend it fully in that moment, but it may be a planted seed to really help you grow at a later time. And there's a really beautiful, gentle nature to things like that. And it's a weird aspect of being that way or trying to have your words fit into society so many people can understand them in that time. And I battle with that in a sense of explaining like a guided meditation to people in terms of like, do you, from whatever level of perspective and experience that has been obtained through my being in this life, do I show people the depth of what's being perceived, or do you help them where they are in terms of breaking it down to where it's so westernized? And I don't know if you have dealt with that or anything, but it's a weird balance.
You got to ask
there.
yourself, when you're doing a particular thing, like, who's it for? Are you in service to this other being, which is not right or wrong, or is this something that's in service just more to you? So there's a dance there. And I think the grace comes from asking yourself, it is important you're translating everything. We do this no matter what. Like, our brains are sort of making all these decisions about what to say, how to move our body, and how to nod or not nod, and should I say this, should I say that, right? So you're making all these micro choices, and you do it anyway. And you're doing that out of a form of recognition of this other being in front of you. It's like, what do they need? What do I want? What are my needs? And it's no difference with that meditation. When you say, like, you want to speak some kind of truth, it's like, okay, I hear that desire. And you could ask yourself, what good would come out of that? If it's like going to help them or you or no one. And maybe it's the desire itself is the thing to look at. It's like, why do I need to express that?
That's beautiful. I feel like musicians deal with a similar concept, at least with people I've talked to, whether it's, are they making the music for themselves or for people?
Well, it's always going to be both, right? If you perform it live, I suppose, there's some people who just play to play, right? They're probably not professional because that quote means you're doing it for money. But there are many people who just play because they enjoy making music, and they just do it, like play piano for a little bit, or sing in a choir in church or something. We used to do that. I think everyone used to do that all the time. That was one of our forms of entertainment, is we get together and sing. And then when recording started happening, so basically for the last 100-some years, we've been paying other people to entertain us. We were like, oh, you sing better than me, I'll stop singing. It's like, but you can't sing. We all have the ability to sing. It feels good. But they decided the people who can do it, quote, better, I'll pay you. I'll just listen to you. And that's where we get into this interesting space of professional musicians and so forth. Or for all the things we now pay people to do. That we can do ourselves that maybe give us benefit, but we stop doing them.
Interesting. What are you experiencing when you're in the flow of producing anything, whether it's music or you related music to even building this room?
Well, it's also going in and out. So, for instance, if you're playing live, let's use the psychedelic thing as an example. You're playing for a psychedelic circle, which is probably the hardest thing that I have done or do occasionally. I do it pretty rarely because it's so hard. And it's hard because you're not controlling the situation, or not that you're ever controlling the situation, but now when I'm very well aware that I'm got my hands on the wheel of the ship, but that's ocean is going to do what it does. And people are counting on me to steer the ship. And that's a big responsibility. And so there are moments, there's like waves. And the waves that come internally that are probably manifested through the energy externally, where I feel at times, this is the last time I do this. Who am I to do this? I'm terrible at this. This is reductive and stupid. All those thoughts, and I see those thoughts happening, and then I see them happening, and I have to say, okay. Just like meditation, let that go instead of grabbing it and getting worse and worse. I mean, because as I'm performing in the space, and then falling into the process of the music that's happening. Okay, just go back into this chord change. Oh, I want to do this thing. I'm going to this melody. Ooh, and now it's starting to engender a feeling. And you start to get into that space of where I'm not really as much consciously thinking about it now. And then sometimes you get into these pockets of just unbelievable pure grace of like, you feel like you're all floating, and I can feel it in the room, and I can feel it coming through me, and I just ride that. And that might last a few seconds. It might last a while. It might be a whole half-hour track. And I recognize sort of not holding on to any of those states, because I know it's going to keep going, flowing in that. And that's like the animal form of me. And this happens in my mind, and probably your mind, all our minds, every day, all day. The in and the out, the in and the out. So it's not like sort of riding these highs and lows. It's sort of like I'm watching it. It's very Buddhist in a sense. I'm seeing it all happen, and I'm not going to try and attach to the impermanence of any of it. And thank God they all end in a way, because otherwise we could get stuck in these things. Maybe that's what depression is and things. It's a way of getting stuck. So I released a record last year called Music for Mushrooms, a soundtrack for the psychedelic practitioner. And that was recorded in 2018, I think, in the summer. And it was in a ceremony. It was a weekend, so it was 2 ceremonies. And it was live, and it was improvised. And you're just hearing what came out. And I think I had to use the 2 nights because I wanted it to be 5 hours. And typically in a ceremony, there's sections of it that I'm not behind my live rig, the thing that's being recorded, and I'm out in the room doing things, and those aren't being recorded. So in order to make an album, I had to use primarily the stuff I was doing at the rig. So I had to use 2 nights to get 5 hours. And of all the things I did, I probably used like 90% of it, I think, maybe, which is a lot. I've had ceremonies where maybe listening back to it, I didn't think there was much there to share with people, whereas sometimes there are some things that there's a good wave. Let's use that and release it maybe, or edit it down. This is the first time I didn't really edit it down, and I just said I'm gonna just release it sort of as is. I mastered it and made it sound as good as I could. But that's why the songs are like a half an hour and stuff, because they take a long time to develop, and that's very intentional. But you're hearing sometimes there are moments of inspiration that I think that's a beautiful space to capture. There's an artist named Keith Jarrett that I really like, and he is a just absolute monster of a pianist and musician, and it's kind of ridiculous to even compare to him, but he inspires me. And one of the things he does, he plays classical, jazz, and also sort of these long-form improvisations, where he sits down at a piano in a concert hall and just starts playing. And sometimes he records all of them, and sometimes I probably releases very few. But there was one in 1974, I believe. It was the Köln Concert in Cologne, Germany. And it's just a magic night of inspiration. I just heard a podcast about that night, and I want to talk about it because it's interesting. I wish I could remember the name of the podcast. I apologize, because it was really well done, and maybe I'll tell you afterwards. You can link to it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Basically, he showed up that day, and this was early in his career, so his 1,400 seats were sold out. So it's kind of a big concert for him, but it was like Teenager or something had put it together. Some new promoter, this girl, she just wanted to do it, and it amazing, like sold out. So there's that expectation. She's a newbie. He shows up. The piano they said he was asking for was, I think, a Busendorfer Concert Grand, which is one of the best. But it's sort of like, that's what I need. And they're like, oh, we have it, no problem, and we'll have a tech there. It'll be tuned. You're good to go. But he shows up. It's not a Busendorfer. It's some other piano. It's smaller. Things on it are broken. Like, I mean, physically, it's like. And they're like, and they said, this is impossible. Like, I can't do what I do. It's impossible for tonight to work. And she's like, this is a big problem because everyone's going to show up. And he leaves. He's like, I'm sorry. And he leaves. And she runs out and begs him, like, you have, please. We have these people. They're going to work on it. Come back, please. And he's like, all right. He comes back, and they work on the piano. They do what they can. But they assume it's going to be a disaster. And they go to a dinner restaurant, Italian restaurant across the street, because they need some food, and they get him some dinner, but they doesn't have much time. So he eats too quickly and eats something he doesn't normally eat. Now he's got like indigestion, doesn't feel well. They go back. They were going to not record it because they normally do, but he said, send him home. This is why record it. And his producer said, let's record it so we have a record of what a disaster is. Or maybe we need that for like to argue later.
That's brilliant.
So they recorded it, and he sits down to play, and now there's certain areas of the piano he needs to avoid because he's like, these keys aren't working well, and that lower register. So now he's got limitations, which forced him to change all of his normal way of approaching this on the spot without rehearsing it. And so he had to sort of like play in a particular register, and because of that, it became kind of repetitious, which got kind of like trance-like. And as soon as he played, it was like, boom. I mean, you should listen to this recording. Köln, Köln. It's just magic. And it's like, it became the best-selling piano instrumental album of all time. I think it still is. It's one of my favorite records. It's so inspired. He's so in the flow. We're talking about the flow. And it's something to do with limitations. It's something to do with like all the other things weren't, quote, perfect. As a matter of fact, maybe his mind is occupied with like my stomach hurts, or I'm in this edge space of trying to figure out the things I have to do differently and avoid. And it kickstarted him into something special. Now, is that alchemy and formula always work? No. Of course not. Otherwise, you just keep doing that. Everyone would. But there's something there, a lesson that I've been thinking about and that I often think about is like these limitations. And the same thing is somewhat true for me in that mushroom space because there are many limitations. It's very different than a normal performance. I don't even think of it as a performance, actually. I think of it as me just trying to allow something to come through as consistently as I can. And it really doesn't matter how, quote, good it is or interesting, because all that matters is it coming from the heart. And if it is, that'll help these people and it'll synchronize exactly as it needs to. But I don't know, what that is, but I know when I can kind of sense when I'm in that stream, in the river, when I'm flowing with the river versus when I'm trying to change the river's direction. And so these are things I think about and what the flow state is and how we get there. And even a space like this, like you don't want it to be too perfect, right? I just learned that across the alley here, that house, they're going to demolish it and build 2 houses, which is the worst news I could get after just finishing this, that there's going to be a year-long noise project. This isn't soundproof. This is, so it'll fuck up anything I'm trying to record, like these pianos. I just bought this one. So now it's like I wanted to and at first I'm like, this is terrible. This is a disaster. And part of me is like, interesting.
Damn.
So what? Now I can only record like 2 hours at night before I'm too tired, and like, all right, maybe that actually is going to help. I don't know. I give it up. I give it up to Maharaji. I give it up to the wind. But all I know is like, I don't want to get too attached to, just as Keith Jarrett did. It's like, this piano's a disaster. I'm out of here. It's like, he had to be coaxed, and I want to be helped too and coaxed. But it's like, I also recognize a lot of this is beyond my control and knowing.
Wow, man. What a perspective. First of all, I can't wait to hear this.
Yeah, it's a long record too. If you ever see it on vinyl, which you'll see it out there every now and then, buy one.
There's nothing like vinyl.
It's fun. It's too vinyl. I mean, like as you hear oh man, he's cool too because he sings and like kind of grunts while he's playing, which was his biggest criticism of him because you hear it on the piano mic, it's like, and he sings while he's doing the melodies. But if you watch a video of him playing today, you've got to see a video of him playing. It's like full body. He's like standing and sitting, and he just goes into a trance, and it screws with his body and his back, and he has to travel with a mattress for hotels. I mean, the dude, he doesn't even have a website. I mean, he's that kind of guy. I love it. It's like not even like, here's where my dates are live. No. Someone else's, there's a group you can get on a mailing list that's called Friends of Keith Jarrett or something, and they will tell you when we learn stuff like he's going to announce a date in Munich, things like that. And like, there are very few artists like that these days that can be successful, and he just doesn't care. He's there to do what he does, and certain people jive out on it. There's a purity to that.
That's inspiring.
Yeah,
in a lot of
Instagram
ways.
or any of this stuff, I mean, Nils Fromm, if you don't, another great pianist to check out, modern guy. Very much in the modern scene. Also, I realized recently, disappeared from social media. He's very popular. I don't know why he did or didn't. All I know is it's gone. No message, like, it's just gone. Not even like he's not active. It's gone. And I'm not saying that's better or worse, but I do admire it in a certain way.
That's the perfect way to put it, for sure. It's a very admirable trait. And I think a part of me, maybe a part of you too, wishes there wasn't social media, but we also understand the benefit from that.
Yeah, it's like I want, part of my work is figuring out how to navigate sort of a spiritual modern life in modern life. That's what I'm personally interested in, so that's reflected in my message and what I do. And so it makes sense for me to figure out then how do we use tools like Instagram and stuff. And I have to figure out how that works for me, and I have people who in my management who actually do it for me. But the point is that I don't just unplug it, because I'm sort of like, just like no one can really go into a cave and get away from the world truly anymore. I think it's sort of like unplugging is there's no out.
Yes.
There's no out. So it's like, so if you can't run, or you can run but you can't hide, the real interesting salient question of today is, how do we walk our walk with all this crazy shit going on? Now, there is no easy prescription, but social media is just one fragment of that you need to also figure out how to walk. And if you don't have a public profile, it can be a lot easier. I think you can just say like, I can just not engage, or but if that's part of your business, and part of my work is saying I want it to be effective, then that's actually disengaging from it. I have to ask myself, is that going to make my work more effective or less? And these days, it's one of the main ways I can let people know that, hey, I have a new offering for you, or like I have questions, or all this ways of connecting with people. So it's a form of advertisement. But you got to figure it out. You got to figure out your own path through all these different streams.
Yeah. And doing it how you feel you should be doing it, not mimicking other people. And I think social media is, especially so I'm 27, like the generation after me, it just feels like people are just regurgitating and trying to fit this formula and this exact thing that's going to give them more followers or whichever. And it's admirable when you see people who don't do that, whether it's they don't have social media or they do it from a deeply genuine place.
It's tough. Isabel helps me with mine. I give her content, but she's doing the actual posting, and that way I can kind of have a filter between myself and that's ecosystem. Smart. Well, mostly because I find it damaging for me. Like if I would get into those, like I haven't looked at a feed in years. The only thing I might look at is my own page and try to like oversee it, and sometimes get in there and but I'm just seeing that even that ecosystem can be close to too much, because the comments and stuff, 99.9% are really positive, but the negative stuff affects me. I don't need to see it. I really don't. And so I'm trying to create filters so I can basically, it's like I'm a human being. I have to have a certain resiliency. It takes a lot of resiliency to get up and perform in front of people, because you're being very vulnerable. And you don't want to, it's a mind game. It's a game of confidence. And so I have to do what I have to do to feel confident. And that's all sorts of things involved in that. But I want my social media to, in a small way, create pause for people in their lives, as opposed to creating more asleepness. So you're inside a medium that's already trying to trance you. But I'm saying, well, if we're going to do this, I want the content, at least in a small way, to be helping, not hurting. I don't want to be part of the problem, even though I'm inside in something that is part of the problem. It just doesn't make sense to me. So it's like, that's the best I can do besides just unplugging from it completely and pulling out, which at this stage I think would be would hurt my work probably more, as far as like if I think there's something of value that certain people might resonate with, they need to be able to know it exists.
Yeah, is it helping or hurting your path? Is it efficient or not efficient? That's an honest way to look at that.
Yeah, obviously it's a bit of both, but this balance of not engaging with it fully has been really helpful. I mean, essentially, I'm paying for that.
It helps you do what you should be doing and not put time where you shouldn't.
Yeah, and if you think about it, if you're doing that every day, that's a lot of energy, right?
Hours, man.
Yeah, but I just don't have that. I don't want, as we spoke about before, it's like it's such a battle for me to play the music every day. Imagine if I had one more thing, I'm like, oh, I got to do that thing first. It's like, and it's sort of sucking something out of you. It really is for me. Like it pulls out a life force because it's all comparison. That's why I don't like feeds. It's like I don't want it. There's no benefit for me comparing my life to this literal filtered view of everyone else's lives. I mean, literally, that's all it is like the cliff notes and the highlights of life. I laugh when I run into my friends who I haven't seen in a bit, and they're like, man, things look like they're going so good. And I'm like, oh, they're looking at social media. I forget that they're, which is sweet that they even care to track. And I say, well, I'm glad it looks that way. It's working. Yeah. You know. It is going great. It is. But my point is, like, I love everything happening in my life. But of course, I don't post about the fight I got in or like the depression. Sure. I rarely do. I try to be as honest as I can, whether it's on a podcast or an interview, and say, this is what I'm going through right now. But I also, it goes back to when you're talking about when you're leading a meditation, you know, there's a grace in saying like, there's a narcissism that I'm like, oh, I'm just going to talk about my negativity all the time. It's like, yes, that might be very honest. I do talk about it, but I choose sort of that dance and the balance because at the end of the day, I want to give people a medicine that I also want to give myself, which is a certain form of inspiration and positivity. That's what I'm trying to do to myself in my mind. So I'm reflecting that publicly. So it's not a veneer of falseness. I do speak all the time about the challenges I'm facing and the problems and the pitfalls and the mistakes I'm making. But I also don't want it to only be that, because that's what happens in my own mind. Like my own personal path is like not being too negative in my head. I worry. And it's like trusting more, or it's like not jumping to the negative conclusion immediately. It's sort of like benefit of the doubt in my own mind. So that's like my edge, and that's my edge in my relationship. You know, it's like, oh, don't just give that. It's like you can give. There are choices. There's another way of looking at this. I could give that first. And that's a compassion for myself and for others that I think will help. It's a way of loving yourself, right?
Absolutely. And all is love. So first of all, before I ask this next thing, the Ram Dass concept of like love your dark thoughts was such an eye-opener for me. And it was the moment I heard it and viscerally felt what that was even like. It was like truly regaining perspective around what was happening and being able to feel love for what was happening. It was like, it's so fascinating when you think about fears or these patterns of thought. They almost disassociate us from the body, even though we feel them in the body. But like home base, honing back into the cells and our physical being, being able to produce love through that and almost pushing those negative aspects and thought patterns away through a stronger motion. Like love is so powerful.
Yeah, loving your dark thoughts, I know for me and a lot of folks, like you're kind of identifying so much with the thoughts that is actually you, and the process is all that. So as opposed to trying to push them away, I love that what he said there. This idea of like, no, to sort of like bring it in like you would a child that's scared, and love it as a way of working with it. That's my favorite track on the album. It really is. And the way the whole thing came to be musically too is like really beautiful process of sort of happenings. And I just love that track. I love everything about it.
It really hit home. It really hit home. And it really helped me see, I mean, times where like, I guess what I battle with is feeling aligned or not aligned in my journey, whether it's with intuition or where I even am. And so there's that part of me that is kind of always, maybe not always, but regularly questioning if I'm where I should be or not.
Well, how does it feel, though, if I were to tell you, if it's this idea, you're always aligned? I mean, how does that feel? You can't not be aligned. You can never be lost. You're always perfect. And if you look back, would you say that's true? Like everything leading up to today, it's like, well, it's what it was. It's what led to this moment and the next moment and all moments, the moment.
Yeah, absolutely.
It just kind of takes the pressure off.
It does.
Because there's no out. There's nowhere that you can be somewhere where you're not supposed to be.
Yeah, that's a really powerful concept of there is no out. Whether you're even involving like reincarnation into that, like there may very well be no out.
Yeah, it makes you think about suicide a lot differently. I mean, if you look at it that way, if it truly, there's just existence in a sense. I don't mean this existence. There's just like energy, and then it's like you put the gun, you pull the trigger, and then it's this other moment, and the next thought is like, fuck. What the fuck did I do? It's like all that life now was sort of a waste, maybe. I don't know. And it's just like it's like I was trying to escape something, but there's nothing to escape. And believe me, I have the endless compassion for suicidal ideation because I felt it myself. And it's a sense of like there's helplessness and nowhere to run. And I know what that feels like. It's awful. But I've been thinking about this idea that there's no out and what that kind of brings up in me and what it feels like. And sometimes it feels like a panic and sometimes it feels like a solace.
Yeah, ever going, ever growing, endless. I mean, that's what presence may very well be too. So I think about this often where it feels like potential goes in each and every direction. Like you have potential like backwards or potential into depression or whichever, and how we behave into that present moment actually determines the direction of potential we head in. And instead of just thinking of potential being only positive, but it really helps me hone deeper into how I'm even approaching any moment. And I mean, yeah, I don't know, endless.
Indeed. Endless possibility, infinite possibilities. I have a friend who has a phrase, he's like, I am a being of infinite possibility. And it's true. At any moment, there's infinite possibilities, which you can look at that in different ways. But it's good to remind ourselves of that, including good possibilities.
To close up this discussion, this episode, thank you, by the way.
Sure. Thanks for coming by.
You've mentioned something. I feel like there's a root that's connecting multiple things you've mentioned in this discussion, where it's whether you're in ceremony playing music and you're allowing that to come through, or you become very accepting and welcoming of the construction that's coming by, this deeper acceptance.
I don't know if I'm there yet, but
you're becoming.
I learned this
hopefully
yesterday, so I'm just like
that's fresh.
I'm still quite concerned about
fresh.
it, but anyway, I'm thinking about it.
Even the practice of softening that tension internally, people who are really beginning that recognition, do you have any perspective to share on how that might be an easier process?
Just to have the compassion with yourself that it is a process. You never arrive anywhere. So for me, for you, for anyone else, you can always see the grass being greener. But from that other grass, it's just another location of movement. And if you give up the notion that you're supposed to be arriving somewhere, whether it's enlightenment or this or that, I mean, hopefully that can be a relief too. There's just process. There's just experience. And there's no wrong way to do it. And when you fall off the surfboard or your bike, you get back on. And sometimes you're waiting for the next wave and you're looking, and sometimes there's big, awesome waves and you're in the tube, and sometimes there's shitty waves or it's really about to kill you. You just do your best. So I think that discipline and desire to improve is the nature of the human journey, and that's something you can be responsible for, is just asking yourself, am I really engaged in that truth of doing my best? But recognizing that even doing your best as a human being is always going to have parts that isn't your best, because that's what it means. There's a balance, and there's no way around that. You're never gonna, like, even if you give money to a cause, could you have given more? I guess so. Yeah. Did you? No. Why? Because you made a choice. That's part of it. Like, you know, you hug someone and a little this, a little less, a little more. It's a dance. Oh, that would be offensive. I'm not going to say that. Or I'm hungry and tired. I need to eat. Oh, I'm ignoring these people. I could do this really nice thing right now. I'm going to do it, you know. And this isn't news. This is what goes on in our heads all the time. But it's to realize that we all go through it. All of us. The Dalai Lama to the bum on the street. Everybody. Unless you're in some kind of madness. But then maybe that's another form of existence that's still equally as valuable. So anyone who says they know what's going on, or this is the prescription, they don't know, and I don't know. Just keep walking your walk and keep breathing, keep letting go, and keep looking for ways. You know, if you look at everything being an opportunity to, if that's perfect for you in some way to make choices, it can be a little more fun. You can see opportunities everywhere, little micro ones.
Beautiful. Do you have any remaining feelings or thoughts that you would wish to share?
I know nothing. This is all metaphor. Don't listen to me.
That's the best. Krishna, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.